back up at the blacksmith shop today. I've been working on forge welding. Most of my practice has just been rolling over rebar and trying to forge weld it together with varying levels of success. So here's a piece here. It looks pretty good, but it does have some seams here in it. And you can see where I folded it over here a couple times at the end. Not a perfect weld. We're gonna try something a little bit different today. We're gonna head over to the wood turning shop. And in here we have an old saw blade. This is off the sawmill. And after doing some research, this saw blade is made out of a metal called 15N20. It's a spring steel, hardenable. And the reason we're going to use this saw blade is I can't sharpen it anymore. So we'll cut it into pieces for a billet and try forge welding. What could go wrong with this plan? All right, so we have this saw blade back at the shop, or back in the garage, and it's about, about 1 inch usable material. I don't know if you can see down here. It's 1 inch there. And they call this a 1.5 inch blade, but these teeth are going to be pretty worthless for us. So I think we're going to end up cutting those off. And the thickness of this material is 0.12. So it's it would take 10 pieces of this, or about 9 pieces of this, to make 1 inch thick. So obviously we're gonna have to stack up multiple layers of this. So I don't know what the best way to do this is. We're just gonna try a pair of 10 snips because it's not that thick. So we'll see if this cuts through it. It seems to cut okay. Wow, that almost took an eye out. All right, so I know I said we're going to cut these in 2 inch pieces, but I think what we're going to do is cut them into 3 inch pieces because that falls just past one of the teeth. So I can just put the clippers next to a tooth and cut it. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, every 4 teeth, we're going to cut this thing. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll just put the cutters right behind that tooth. All right, so the next step would be to cut these teeth off and try to get a nice straight edge so that we can weld this billet together. And I don't know that I'm going to be able to cut these off because they're pretty hard right there on the edge. So we may just put them on the grinder. That's probably an easier thing. So yeah, we're just going to grind off each one of those teeth and try to cool it down in between each one. All right, so that gives us 6 pieces of steel, mostly cleaned up, but I want to clean up the surface here because there's some kind of, probably something from the sawmill belt that's left on the metal. So we're just going to hit it with a sander real quick to clean those edges up. All right, let's see if our belt sander will clean these things up. All we're looking to do is take the, whatever that stuff is, off of it. Something like that. All right, there's our 6 pieces mostly cleaned up. We're gonna go ahead and wipe them down with acetone just to make it a little bit better, but I don't think it's that important. So acetone does not seem to be cleaning this thing very well. So we may put it back on the sander just to make sure we don't have any grungy stuff in our welds. So I'm gonna go put them back on the grinder for a second. I'll be right back. All right, we got them a little bit better cleaned up on the sanding flat disc. Now we're gonna wipe them down with acetone just to get any fingerprints or whatever off. And we only have to do the parts of the metal that are gonna be touching. So the two outside edges don't seem to really matter. So now we have all of our pieces of metal stacked up. And we'll get a measurement after we get it all clamped together. All right, we're gonna even up one end and the back edge and clamp it. Clamp it, not JD clamp it. We're gonna clamp it with a little clamp here. We're gonna put a second clamp on it also. Oh, come on, these things are never adjusted the way you want them. And we'll get that right on there, nice and tight. Get this one tighter. Now we're going to go ahead and weld up this edge and the back edge, and then we'll grind these other sides flat. So let's hold off for that. Let's get the welder out. Fire, fire. You guys didn't see that. Never put anything flammable on your welding table. All right, so what we ended up with is a bead of weld here on the corner. On the other corner, I got one right there in the middle. And on this side. Now we're going to go ahead and grind this end off flush, so everything's nice and flat. And we're also going to hit the grinder on this edge where the teeth were and get it nice and flat, and then come back and hit it with some more weld on those edges. And that should be good enough. All right, let's hit it a few more times with the welder on these new edges. All right, in theory, that's enough. I'm gonna go ahead and take the clamps off, take a look at it. I might add a couple more welds, and there is one more thing we do need to do. So I think the last thing we need to do is weld this piece of rebar right to the end so that we don't have to use any tongs to pick it up while we're putting it in and out of the forge. All right, so looking around at all the welds, making sure that all the plates are attached. They're not perfect, but they look good enough. So we're gonna go ahead and take this up to the blacksmith shop and start trying to make a billet out of this. So we have our stacked billet back up at the blacksmith shop, and we're heating up the forge to get to a forge welding temperature. We don't really know how hot that is, but it's got to be hot. All right, we've already discussed that I really don't know what I'm doing, but we're going to go ahead and choke down the air on this forge, and I think what that does is make it more of a propane-rich environment, less oxygen, which will help us to prevent getting, I don't know, forge scale on the metal. Forge scale? Is that the right word? I think it is. We're also going to heat up the metal just a little bit, put some borax on the seams, and that'll keep any oxidation from getting inside. And if there's any impurities in there, the borax will help clean that out. So better? I don't know. We'll see. So the forge isn't quite up to temperature, but we're going to go ahead and heat up our billet a little bit so we can put some borax on it. Bring it back out. We'll give it a little bit in the seams here. And we'll put it in for the long haul. So that flux kind of sticks to the weld, except right there where it fell off. And when it goes in the fire, it adds a lot of, well, I don't know what it does, but it does something. And I think we're good. We'll just let it heat up to forge welding temperature, which I'm guessing is just super hot. Forge welding temperature. Some people say put it in there till it's really hot and you'll see the flux kind of float on the surface. So we're going to wait for that. Other people just say, I don't know, make it hot. We'll see. The billet slowly come up to temperature. We're going to rotate it one time just to keep the flux from fluxing out. So the forge is finally up to temperature. You can see by the orangish flames that are coming out that it's a non-oxidizing flame. The billet inside is super white hot. I think we're going to pull it out and start beating on it. Now I am going to wear gloves for this part because that flux as we hit it is going to be squirting out of there. That's it. We pulled it out, hit it a few times lightly. We're going to put it back in the fire, do that 2 or 3 times, and then we'll start seeing if it's stuck together. I'm really happy the way the flux was flowing out of the seams when I was hitting it, and it looks like it's heating up really quick. So we're going to pull it right back out and do this again. Back in the fire again. We're going to keep hitting around the outside edges, or maybe we should go middle out. I'm not sure, but we're just going to keep hitting on it. It's definitely super hot in there. You got to be careful with this flame coming out too. You could lose an eyebrow with that. Alright, I think the welds are set, but we're going to heat it up and do it one more time, just to make sure. Also, I think we can do away with the gloves now. There's no more flux coming out of the joints, so that's good. I don't know if there's any risk of overheating the metal in the gas forge, but we'll see. Alright, I think at this point we're going to go and turn the forge back down. I don't think we need quite that much gas in there. We also might open up the vent a little bit, let it burn a little more optimal. And we're just going to start forging this down into a square billet. Square's good. Trying to square this up. I'm just looking for any cracks or anything along the edge. So far, so good. We'll see. am seeing is a lot of this forge scale on the outside of the billet when it's coming out. I don't know if we have a lot of extra flux laying inside the furnace or if I'm just doing something wrong. So as I'm heating the billet up, I'm looking for any dark spots or seams across the top. So far, everything looks nice and even. I think we might be successful with this. Occasionally I still get a little bit of that flux that splatters out and hits my hand and burns. Forging's dangerous. We know the metal started out 1 inch wide and just under a 1/2 inch thick. So I guess we're going to be about 3/4 by 3/4 once we get it all forged out. Looks like maybe 2 more heats should do that. Been using really light hammer blows because I don't want to crack the welds, but I think we're to the point now we can just wail on it, so it should move pretty quick now. So the billet's still looking really good in there. The color's consistent all the way through. I think we're about where we want to be with it. We have to decide what we want to make out of this. So I don't know if we just cool it down now and grind the edges and look for cracks, or do we just go ahead and make it into a knife? What I'd like to do is square it up one more time, and then we will let it air cool and hit it on the grinder just to check all the edges, and then figure it out from there. I'm going to switch to the Harbor Freight anvil. It has a little bit wider face on it, so we can square up this billet maybe a little easier. right, we just shut down the forge. I'm happy enough with this to put it on the grinder. I'm going to leave the rebar stick on it, so once we start forging a knife, we still have a way to hold on to it. But overall, it looks pretty good. I don't see any separations. I don't see anything glaringly bad with it, but we'll see. We're going to leave our billet in the forge as the forge cools down. I think that'll help relieve any stresses that are in the billet as we were forging it. So I think it might be a good time for a cold snack. All right, so we ground back all the edges, and I can still see little lines. And I don't know if that's good or bad. Probably bad, but let me know in the comments what I should do about that. Maybe I'll just keep grinding it down a little bit, see if they go away. But in between each one of the welds, I can see the layers. I'm thinking that's not good. And if we flip it over and look at the other side, same situation. Focus, camera. Still, you can see a little bit of lines where those layers are. So maybe we will heat it up and try to flatten it out more and push those imperfections further out and then grind them out. In the comments if you think that's a failure of the forge weld, or is it just the edges of the metal still showing. I'm turning the forge back on now. We're going to flatten it out a little bit more and see if it gets better. Well, I refluxed the edges and we're heating it back up to welding temperature, and we're just going to flatten it a little bit more, see if we can get those seams to go away. Everything I'm seeing online says you shouldn't be able to see the seams when it's done. I think we're going to go ahead and keep squaring the piece up. Right now it's still flat in the direction of the weld. If I keep flattening it the other way, maybe it'll be better. We'll see. One thing that I noticed, we started out with a 3-inch long billet, and now we're out to probably 7 or 8 inches long. So if I smash it much more, we're not going to get a blade out of it. So instead of flattening it the other way, I think what I'm going to try is a twisted Damascus on this billet, and if it doesn't crack, then we should be okay. Now immediately I noticed down here at the bottom there is a little bit of separation happening. So I don't think I got it hot enough down by the rebar. So let's heat that up again. Starting to get warm in here. Now it's about time to decide what shape we want on our knife. We're thinking the billet's okay. Let's just make something. I think we have a rough blade outline. Let's go ahead and cut this thing off the rebar so we can work on the handle end. I think we're going to try to shorten the handle by pushing the steel at the end in kind of like a railroad spike, and then we'll put a twist on it. Sounds good. Trying to do is just upset the end a little bit by driving it into the knife, and then we'll just kind of put a little ear on the end of it. I think that's all we're going to get. I think that looks pretty good. Now let's go ahead and heat it up and put a twist on it. Twist went really well in one heat. We're going to heat it up one more time and just straighten everything on the anvil and then get it ready to quench. The next part I'm not really sure about. All I have is a water quench. I'm not sure if this metal is good for water quenching, but we're going to do it anyway. I didn't hear anything bad happening. There is ice in my bucket though. The water's all frozen. That couldn't be a good thing. Looks pretty straight. I'll say that's good. So I turned the forge off in here and it's starting to get cold. It's 21 degrees outside and these old board and batten walls just don't really hold the heat in very well. But we're going to start grinding on this knife, see if we can get a shape that looks pretty good. And we'll look at the Damascus pattern, see if it's delaminating or anything bad. I don't know if it's really Damascus, but it's layered steel, so good enough. we just finished the rough grinding, and there's a few imperfections in the blade on this side. You can see a few little somethings right there, nothing major. I still left it fairly thick, so the blade is probably an eighth of an inch thick. So we got a lot of grinding still to do. This side's kind of worrisome though. Remember we put that full twist in it. There's a little slot or something right here, an inclusion. We could probably grind that out while we're cutting the bevels to sharpen the knife. This one here is a little more worrisome. It's up in the middle of the blade. Focus your camera. I don't think it's structurally going to be a problem, but it's going to be ugly. There's nothing wrong with ugly. Let's get on the little grinder, see if we can cut some bevels on this thing and sharpen it. right, we're off the grinder, and let's see if we can get this thing in focus here. So we cleaned up the pommel. It hooks into your hand nicely back here. I hit the edges of the twist a little bit just to see if there were any raised parts from our forging, our Damascus. I don't see any. I do see a little, looks like maybe a crack in this area, but I ground on it a little bit and it didn't seem horrible. I think it's the line of this piece coming around. It goes through the blade here, goes all the way around, and then comes back through the blade again up here on the front. But it's not on the cutting surface, and we know it's only 1/6 of the blade, worst case. I don't see any delaminations on the spine, so that looks good all the way. And on the cutting edge, I don't see any delaminations from anywhere where I've ground for the edge, so that's really good. But yeah, it's super sharp. I mean, it's super sharp, and overall it looks pretty good. I don't know what kind of knife you would call that, but it's kind of a little bit of a drop tip on the front, a nice straight bellied cutting edge, easy to hold. I didn't sharpen it right here, so you get a little bit of a spot for your finger to fit into, and that looks really cool. So overall, we're gonna have to say our first shot at layered Damascus worked out pretty good. We went ahead and put a twist in it for good measure on the handle, and there's a twist in the Damascus on the blade. Now, I didn't etch it at all. I don't have anything to etch it with, but we're gonna call that a win. We're gonna try this again with a couple other pieces of metal, and I think I'm gonna put some other types of metal between the bandsaw blades so that we can see a little bit of a pattern come out. But overall, we're gonna say that's good. You guys get outside, do something fun, come back and tell me about it.